Today we're going to be learning about tax and tip. We're going to be writing our definitions of tax and tip right below the title of our notes today. Now, a tax is the amount of money added to a purchase. When we talk about tax, we're talking about the money that's added to different sales. So different states and different counties have different amounts of sales tax. So when you go to the grocery store and you buy something, you have to pay a tax on it. The other thing is tip. Tip is the extra money that you give someone for a service. For example, this could be what you give a waiter or a waitress when you go to a restaurant. It could be a hairdresser if you go to get your hair cut, a delivery person who's delivering you something, or even your taxi driver when you take a taxi somewhere. So that would be an example of where you would find having to give a tip. There's a couple steps that we're going to talk about with tax and tip. Step number 1 is to change the percent into a decimal. Step number 1 is going to go on the first flap, and step number 2 is going to go on the second flap. When I open step number 1, on the inside I should have that first step, which is to change the percent into a decimal. And if we forgot, we need to move the decimal point 2 places to the left in order to change that. On the side, I'm going to remind myself that in order to do that, I have to move the decimal point 2 places to the left. Step number 2 is to multiply the decimal from step 1 by the original number. Step number 2, when I open up that flap, it's going to have step number 2, which is to multiply the decimal from step 1 by the original price. And then step 3, if you are finding the tax, you need to add, and if you're finding the tip, you also need to add. In step 3, I'm going to put my little flaps for tax, tip, and then I'm going to put one for discount, even though we're going to be talking about that later. Under tax, I'm going to put that I'm adding, and I'm adding the original price plus the tax. Tip, I'm going to write the same thing because again I am adding, and I am adding the original price plus the tip. Okay, and those are the only two ones we are filling out, the tax and the tip. On the bottom of your paper, I would like for you to put, don't forget to label, so that you make sure that you label all of your prices with your $sign. The first example that we're going to talk about, it says, Sydney goes out to dinner with 3 of her friends to Buffalo Wild Wings. The total bill was $35. They want to leave a 20% tip. How much is the tip? How much is the total? And how much does each girl owe? So if I look back, step number 1 says to change my percent into a decimal. 20% as a decimal is 0.2. So I'm going to be multiplying my 0.2 times my original amount, which was the $35. That is how I'm going to find how much tip I'm going to leave. So 0.2 times 35 ends up being 7. So I'm going to leave the waitress an extra $7 for waiting on me. I'm then going to take my original amount and add my tip to it. So I originally had to pay 35, but now I'm adding 7 more. So I get a total of $42 that my meal is going to cost. Now it says, how much does each girl owe? So I'm going to look back at the beginning, and it says Sydney goes out to dinner with 3 of her friends. Well, if Sydney goes with 3 of her friends, that means I have 4 girls who are splitting the bill. So I'm going to take my $42 and divide it by 4 people. $42 divided by 4 ends up being 10.5, so each girl owes $10.50. The next example is Melanie earns 18% gratuity while waiting tables at a local restaurant. If one table's bill equals $52, what is the total cost of the bill? I'm going to follow my same steps, so I'm going to take my 18% and change it to a decimal and multiply it by my original amount. 18% as a decimal is 0.18, so I'm going to multiply 0.18 times 52. When I multiply 0.18 times 52, I'm going to get 9.36, which means I'm going to be tipping Melanie $9.36 on top of the $52. To find out how much I owe total, I'm going to take my $52 and add the $9.36 to it. Making my grand total that I'm leaving $61.36. The third example that we're going to do today says Rebecca wants to buy a shirt when she goes to the mall. The shirt that she wants is $50 but has a 6% sales tax. The next example that we're going to do is about sales tax. It says Rebecca wants to buy a shirt when she goes to the mall. The shirt that she wants is $50 but has a 6% sales tax. How much will the shirt be total? So I'm going to do my same steps. I'm going to change my 6% into a decimal, which would be 0.06. Then I'm going to be multiplying it by my original amount. So 0.06 times 50 to find out how much tax I have to pay. That ends up being $3 in tax. I'm going to add my tax back to my original amount, so $50 plus my $3 in tax, making my total $53 for the shirt. Last but not least, our final example is also about sales tax. It says, if the sales tax for the city of LA is 9.5%, how much would you pay for an item that costs $200? Again, step number 1 is to take my percent and change it to a decimal. Remember that you are pulling your decimal point 2 places to the left, so it ends up being 0.095. I'm going to take my 0.095 and multiply it by my 200 to figure out how much tax I will be paying. The tax ends up being $19 when you multiply. So I'm going to take my $200 that it cost me and add the $19 of tax, making my grand total $219 for my item.